Hello YouTube. In this video I'm going to be explaining on how to create good looking professional thumbnails for your YouTube game videos or walkthrough videos without having to spend any money on any kind of software. I do have another video that explains how to create these thumbnails using Photoshop elements, Adobe Photoshop elements, which is pretty inexpensive software compared to regular Photoshop, but it does still cost money. So in this video I am not using any commercial tools. I'm going to be using a open source tool called GIMP. It is available for download for free for pretty much any platform out there. They have Windows application, they have Linux, they have Mac OS X, pretty much anything under the sun. They have a distribution for it. I will have a link to their website, which is pretty simple, gimp.org, in the description for this video. But all you do is go in to gimp.org, click on the download, and then because I'm on Mac, it pulls up the Mac OS X by default, but if you're on a Windows it will pull up the Windows, and Linux obviously will pull up the Linux. So once you get done with downloading this, install it according to your operating system. On Mac it's pretty simple. You download a DMG, open it up, and then just drag the application into your applications folder. So pretty simple. Once that's done, it's only about 100 megs download, so it's a pretty small application, but it's a very, very powerful application with a lot of plugins, and it pretty much can rival Photoshop in capability. But of course, being, you know, community supported and free, it's not as nice and polished, and it probably doesn't have all the features Photoshop has. And the support is, you know, not commercial support, but more of a community support for it. So that out of the way, let's go back to where do you find the images and how do you start creating the good looking thumbnails. So as many of the other YouTubers mention in their guides how to create thumbnails, you would just go to Google Images as a good source and just search for something that is related to your video that you're making a thumbnail for. So in this case, as an example, we're gonna use the upcoming game Metro Last, if I can only spell, Last Light wallpaper. And in the other video I used this first image right here because it works for YouTube due to some criteria that I have. I covered it in the other video, but if you haven't watched it, we'll go over it again. Basically, YouTube, when you put a thumbnail on your video, usually covers up the bottom right and top left corners with their own information overlays. Bottom right is usually reserved to show the length of the video, and the top left usually is reserved to show a sequence number of the video if you add your video to a playlist. So those are kind of reserved, so you don't want to put any kind of information that is important in there because users won't be able to see it. So this first image works with those requirements because the game, the name of the game is right there in the top right, and you can see it. It's pretty contrasty, so that's good. And the bottom left is wide open for our use and to put the sequence number, annotation, or whatever, what have you. So let's go ahead and just get this image. Let's put it in the downloads. So that's good. Let's get rid of this and go ahead and find our GIMP. GIMP looks like this little, I guess this is a fox or something like that. So let's get this guy open. So over the years, GIMP of course became more and more powerful application, and it is looking better and better. And you used to have some elaborate workarounds in order to make it work in OS X, but this version, starting with I think 2.8 and up, is native to the Mac OS X, so if you're on a Mac, that would be good. The UI, as you can see, is not as great and polished as Photoshop or any other commercial tools for Mac OS X, but it still works. It has all the tools and everything. There is no background. You kind of have this assortment of separate windows on your screen. So this is your tools. This is the main manipulation window where you manipulate your actual image, and this is the histogram on the other tools, like your layers and everything else is on the right side, and it's all in 3 different kind of related windows, but there's no window that holds it all together like in Photoshop or Photoshop Elements. But as I said, it works, and that's what the important part is, and that you can't beat the price. It's free. So let's go ahead and get started with this image. Let's just drag it over here, have it, oh, what just happened there? Well, and that's another thing with a free tool, sometimes it's a little glitchy. Alright, so let's do File, Open, let's see, Downloads, let's see if that opens. Okay, well that opened, so that's good. So we have the image as our background layer on here, and as I said, the layout is pretty good. Everything is fine. The one thing is that it is not an HD resolution, so aspect ratio is a little off. I think it's 16:10 versus 16:9, which is, you know, would be required for 720p or 1080p, depending on what videos you upload. So we will need to crop this a little bit to make it a 1080p resolution. And to do that, there's this crop tool that looks like a little knife, I guess. So we'll go select that and just kind of start and drag it over and try to get to a 1080p, which you can see the size in the bottom of the window there. So let's do 10. There we go. So once you set this size of 1920 by 1080, you can kind of move it around to get your best layout so that everything you're interested in a picture fits in it. So I want this Metro Last Light logo to be in there, and the guy to be fully in there and not cut off his feet or anything like that. And this top part is not very important. So this looks right, and to finalize your crop, you just hit enter. So that just cut off those extra parts, and now we ended up with a 1920 by 1080 resolution. So that's great. That matches 16:9 aspect ratio. That's great. So next thing we'll do is pick a spot where we would put our text. In my case, I usually put the sequence numbers. And this bottom left, as I said, is a very good spot for it. However, my idea is to kind of match the color of the text, which is this whitish yellow, for my sequence numbering. And if I put it there, there's not enough contrast. This is pretty light background. So one thing you can do is do some adjustments and darken this corner. So let's do that. The way I do it, I usually add this kind of an adjustment layer on top of it, and then just take a brush, make sure that you have black foreground selected, and let's make this brush a little bigger. And in order to make your brush bigger, see that little circle growing there? You just use the curly braces on your keyboard, and the right curly brace makes it bigger and the left actually makes it smaller. So I want, as I said, to make this corner a little darker, so let's go ahead and just start painting here. Don't worry about it, it's all black and that's fine. We'll just adjust it later, so that is actually doing what it is supposed to do. So I'm just painting over here. So that's fine. It's all black, and you know, that's obviously looks ugly. However, we'll just go over here to the layers pane, and there's this opacity little drop down. So let's just drop that down to I don't know, let's try 75. So that looks better. Maybe a little lower. Let's do 65. That looks good. So it did darken it up. It looks like there's just like shade from the guy standing there or some junk. So it doesn't look out of place. So that's the thing I was shooting for. So that's good. You can still see the background, but it is darker. And if we put a light text on there, there's going to be enough contrast for the text to stand out. So without further ado, let's go and actually switch to text. So the adjustment is over here. Everything's in order. Let's get this layer selected so that it's the next layer that gets added with the text actually will be on top of it, because GIMP doesn't actually do, as I said, smart layer switching for you, but it's a free tool, so let's just get used to it. Let's pick the color for our font, something in this yellowish white. Again, that didn't choose it at all because the layer is wrong. So let's pick one from this layer, something in this more of a yellowish, there we go, tint. So that's good. Back to this layer, add a text here. Let's drag this box, boom. Let's go to the font that I used on the last video, which is Chalk Duster. And the size would be about 230. Type it in as number 01. That looks right. Yellowish, good. Let's go back to this move tool. Position it so that it's nice and cool over here. Let's make it a little bigger. You can't just drag on here to make the text bigger, so you have to go back and actually select the text and make the font bigger. So 240, maybe 250. That looks good. So that's that. Back to move tool. Let's see, that looks good. So at this point in time, this is ready. I would save the and I just did a Control S or Command S, depending on if you're on Mac on a PC. So save your image. It by default saves it in this XCF format, which is a format that preserves all the layers and adjustments and everything else, kind of like a PSD for Photoshop. So let's go ahead and save that. And then in order to be able to use this on YouTube, you'll go in to File and Export, and then just choose what you want to export it as. I usually do PNG, that doesn't lose any quality. So that's a good choice. Name it something like the name of the image and then _1 for 1, and then you can make a whole bunch of these. Do an export for 1, change the number to 2, then do an export for 2, and so on and so forth, as many parts of the video as you have. And then once you upload your videos, all you do is browse back to this folder and just select them as your custom thumbnails. So that's that. You just click export. All the default settings are fine. Let's just do export. Takes a little bit here to actually convert it. And once that's done, we can go back to downloads over here and make sure that that PNG looks right. Okay, that's your thumbnail. So that's good. If you upload 1080p, this will work. You can also use it for 720 if you want to. I usually resize mine since I don't do 1080p, I do 720, and it's very easy to do. You can just go to image and do scale image over here. I can't read obviously, and then just do 1280 by 720. It just does it automatically once you click out of the box to preserve the aspect ratio, and make sure that when you do this resizing, this little link is chosen to be there. It's activated. That way when you resize one dimension, it resizes the other one automatically. So 1280 by 720 is the standard resolution for 720 HD, and you just do scale, and once it's done with this thing, that's the image that you get. And then at this point in time, you can go back to file, export, and I just chose to overwrite it, and you can also do a file export with the 3 dots, and then it'll let you choose where to export and what to name it as well. So that's that. Let's go back to downloads over here and see what it just did. PNG, and PNG is obviously now the smaller size, which is still fine for thumbnails. So that's one way of doing the thumbnails when you start with a downloaded image of something. Now another way to do this would be to get a screenshot from the game that you might be playing or doing a walkthrough for. I use Elgato game capture for my video capturing, and this is just an example video that I had of Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, and this seems like a good example image that you would like to maybe use as your thumbnail. The one problem with this image is this press start button and some white text over here. But I'll show you how to get rid of that, and you can use those techniques to clean up just a gameplay screenshot if you want to get rid of maybe names or HUD or any other information that might be on screen that you would not like on your thumbnail. So in order to use this, I'll just click this handy button to make a snapshot. Get rid of this. Switch back to GIMP over here. We'll open. It's on my desktop, so let's just do that. So there we go. Let's go ahead and clean that text up. So zoom right into it. We'll use the same thing as we used in the other tutorial. It's the clone tool. There is a difference on how this tool works on GIMP. So I'm holding the left curly bracket to reduce the size of the clone tool. So let's get it to a more manageable size here. That's about right. So as I mentioned, it works a little bit differently than it does in Photoshop, but it still accomplishes the same thing. So as you see here in the bottom, it says click control, the command and click to set the target, and I'm on a Mac, so it's command. On a Windows it probably will be control. So by holding control and clicking over here, I created a source for where the cloning will take its pixels to replace the ones that I want to replace, and that's set. We'll just go ahead and just try and clean this up. So as you see, once I release the button, the source goes right back to the place where I clicked, and on Photoshop tools it stays relative to the area that I'm actually copying onto. So just getting used to it. It's a little bit different than so let's actually put a new source over here, because this is a little darker over here. So there we go. So that's all nice and cleaned up over here. Let's make it darker. Let's go back to the other text, which is over here, and do the same kind of thing. Put a source somewhere over here and then start cleaning this stuff up. This is pretty easy to do once your background, when your background is all the same color or pretty much the same color. So as we move horizontally, I have to keep setting new source points just because there's like a gradual lightening of the background going on here. Now we get to the harder part where the actual guy is standing behind the text. So we'll have to set a whole bunch of points here since there's so much change in here, but it should be still pretty quick. I keep my clone tool size pretty big, so the cleanup goes pretty fast here. And that's pretty much it. Let's zoom out of here. Alright, so it's pretty much invisible, and you know, you can of course do a better job if you're more careful. I was just rushing here for the video, but from this point on, this is a pretty good background. The bottom right is already kind of darkened, so if you want to make the sequence number the same color as this Call of Duty, you can just use the eyedropper tool here, pick the foreground color, and then just follow the same steps, you know, adding the text box over here. Let's do 230 or something like that. That was there, and 01. That box is too small. So that's pretty much it. Then position this box wherever you want. There we go, so that it doesn't cut off. And that's pretty much it. From here on, you just repeat the same steps to save and export the thumbnail. There is no resizing necessary because, as I said, we used the source video for this, so it's the same exact size. And that is pretty much it. So if this video was helpful for you guys, please like it, subscribe to the channel, and thank you for your support.